right, Leslie. So we have your PDF here, and it sounds like you might have made some changes since this, as you had your maquette where you were printing out your images. So there might be changes that you've already made to this, but I'm still going to go over it. And if you have questions, of course, we can go back and forth as often as you need. So the first thing is a lot of students, when they're working with Blurb, show what their cover is going to look like. So I am curious what your cover will look like, how you'll present your name, the font, if you're going to have a title on there. And then as we open it, the first page, generally speaking, is your name again, maybe the name of the project and your website. So before we even get to this picture, I'd like to see another page that has your name on it. Excuse me. So I've added a page to your book here on the right side because my thought as I'm looking through this would be a single image, and then you'd move into these images paired up like this. I could be wrong on that, but that's the assumption I'm working on right now. So this is a great image to start off with. I think that's a really strong image. I don't think it's your strongest image, so I think it's a good image to start off with. I think sometimes we start a little, or I should say this about myself, I start a little strong and then I kind of lose momentum as I go through my portfolio. So it's good to have one of your stronger, but not your strongest images there. All right, and then we move down and it's the same girl, and you have the legs of her, which I love this detail shot. I haven't seen that. And then you have the full figure here. And both of those work really well. And I think there's a little bit of repetition that's happening, seeing her again right away. So as you move through this, you might think about putting a little bit more space. So maybe the next girl here, you have these two as page 3 and 4, and then you have these. So okay, you would have page 1, 2, 3, and then you could go 4, 5, and then you'd need to switch again, right? So 6, 7, and then 8, 9, and then the self-portraits. So just thinking of how you can switch it so it's less obvious that we're seeing that same person again. So I think that pairing, though, is a good pairing. Along with this, we've seen, I think we've seen both of these images, and of course, it's a good pairing. I think there's a little bit of these images being a little static in the way that you're presenting them. So I want you to just look through portfolios, and there's so many different ways to present work, right? From like full page right next to each other to having a couple right next to each other. Here there's 3 next to each other. You could have them different sizes next to each other. If you're printing on both sides of the paper, that opens up to even more options. And I often think this is a really beautiful way to show images having one spanning both pages and then having one as a single vertical. That might work well for your self-portrait image, or even this here where you have them next to each other. So I want you to work on the variation of how you're presenting them a little bit. And maybe I'll send these to you as a zip file. I've just made this kind of file over time of different images and different ways that you can put images together, and most students aren't thinking this way. So there's lots of variety there. You don't want to get too complicated with it because you don't want that to be the focus, but you also don't want to get kind of stale with the way that you're presenting them, especially when there's so much space around them, right? So when there's so much space around them, it's more obvious the shape of the image. If they're full bleed, the shape of the image is less obvious. And also it looks like you're working with a square, I think, square portfolio now instead of a vertical. So maybe just that switch back to a vertical would work better. Of course, these two work perfectly together. These two are looking nice together. And then your self-portraits, those are the two that I think maybe even on the same page would work well. That'd be more if you had a horizontal portfolio. And then you have this single image, which I think you took out of the printed images. I don't remember seeing that. And if you're pairing them up on pages, everything else is pairing up. So you would want another image from this. I think you had it. Oh no, this is a different. Okay. So maybe you don't have another image there. All right. And then as I talked about with your printed out images, I think moving to this image next would work best because it's a slower transition than from moving indoors to moving outdoors, because this almost feels like your indoor shots, right? So having these two images, I think, would be a smoother transition, and then go into incorporating more of the environment as you have in these images. Yeah, and these are beautiful new shots. Portraits with hard light, I think, work like 25% of the time that students shoot them, but I think you have a really nice eye for how to utilize that light and how to create mood with it. Yeah, those are both really beautiful. One thing I do notice is the difference in the saturation of the background. Like the ocean looks really blue here and much less blue here. So if they're going to be paired together, that's something you might want to edit slightly in Photoshop so they match a little bit better. And then these two new images I think are really beautiful. So you've done a great job with your overall portfolio here, getting all of these images together, and they're looking very, very cohesive at this point. Let's see, you have 20 images, so you do have room to take some out if you needed to, and then pairing them together. And if you have some images that are just single images, like this woman here that you want to keep, but you don't have another image to go on the other side, that's totally fine. You don't have to have all of these images paired up with another image. So this is a terrible example because these are two of your strongest images, probably your two strongest images. But if you decided you didn't want to include this image, you could have this as a single image and have just a blank page over here. And you could do that multiple times throughout your portfolio, right? You don't have to have it paired up and so even throughout. You have a little more freedom with your format than I think you have. And given that your images are already so cohesive, that variation on format can add a little bit of variety. So it can make us kind of refocus and re-grab our attention as we move through the portfolio. So that could be really useful for you.